the show started good. You got Taz and Cage and Starks out there. Taz is good promo. The problem I had with this was Taz comes out with Cage and Starks. They're talking about Darby Allin because obviously that's their issue. But there's Darby Allin all alone in the bleachers, sitting there in his gear with his title belt over his shoulder. And when Taz starts talking about him or talking to him, they already had the spotlight, but boom, they put the spotlight on him. This wasn't staged at all. Taz did a good promo and tried to put Brian Cage over, which he does a good job of verbally until Cage starts wrestling, and then he gets less over again. And he put Matt Sydal over also verbally. That's the opening match, Brian Cage and Matt Sydal. And Matt Sydal was announced at 166 pounds. I don't know that I heard Cage's, but Cage apparently has 90-plus pounds on Matt Sydal, right? In this, it's going to be a big man, little man match. Matt Sydal, as Taz mentioned, even has a victory over Chris Jericho in the past. So, anyway, this is right? It's a 160-something pound guy, veteran, against a giant 250-plus pound bodybuilding beast. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you want me to say there, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted you to say right. Because within 17 seconds of the bell ringing, Brian Cage was on his ass in the corner, turnbuckles being drop-kicked in the face. And then he took over and manhandled Sydal and dominated him and got a long heat on him with a few hope spots. But they gave the people what they should have worked for at the start and then had to start all over again and build it up and give them something they'd already seen already. You don't do a match this way. Start out, let Cage muscle Sydal around like he was doing in the body of the match. Let him fucking not give him just ridiculous bump over and over again, but out muscle him, throw him away, foil him with his strength. Sydal can't figure out how to get the fucking key to this thing. Then suddenly, Cage, a few minutes into the match, stumbles or misses something, and Sydal gets a springboard or a drop kick, and he takes the big man, and the people will pop big for Cage just taking a bump. And then let Sydal have a flurry that's a little more sustained, because now that he's got him rocking and rolling, and he's drop kicking, he's flying cross body and whatever the fuck, and Cage is off kilter. And then Cage comes up with something where he catches him out of fucking midair and slams him for a big bump, and then he gets some real heat on him. Whereas before he was just out muscling and foiling Sydal's offense. Now you can do a short but more intense set of heat that won't be so long and doesn't require the guy to take such punishment from a guy 100 pounds heavier than he is. But then suddenly, after that long heat, Sydal was fresh enough to go through complicated gymnastics with Cage in his comeback. You saw this, where now they're ducking and dodging and cartwheeling and doing everything. And then suddenly, Sydal throws Cage, or Cage takes a bump, rolls out on the ramp, the wooden ramp, and Sydal gives Brian Cage the Meteora, they call it, the double knees into the chest. He jumps off the top rope, plants both knees in Cage's chest while he's standing up, and drives him down to the ramp. The goddamnedest bump I've ever seen. Cage took it perfectly. He went flat down on that fucking hard-ass ramp. So did Sydal, knees first, right over Cage's shoulders, because he gave it to Cage safe. He almost just crippled himself. I can't believe he didn't jack both his knees up. And that kind of impact with your knees bent in car wrecks is what tears your MCL. It looked fantastic. You saw the bump, right, that I'm speaking of?
Yeah, of course.
What a fucking move. I rewound it and watched it 3 or 4 times. And then I continued watching. And immediately after that, Cage rolled into the ring after taking that hell of a fucking move. And Sydal, instead of going in to try to cover him, went up to the top rope and came off. But Cage jumped to his feet. The guy who'd just been given that horrible move Cage jumps to his feet. Sydal come off the top rope, landed in the ring on his feet, threw some kicks at Cage. Cage picked him up for a power bomb. Sydal sunset flipped and bridged to his feet, threw more kicks, and then gave Cage a screwy fucking suplex of some kind. After one of the goddamn most impressive moves I've ever seen, I remember the territories where nobody had a fucking finish that looked this good ever. And it was dangerous to do. And they got in and just jumped up and started doing more moves to each other. And at that point, it completely degenerated into them just doing shit to each other back and forth, and Cage working like he was the same size as Matt Sydal. And then suddenly, Sydal comes off the top again, and then Cage becomes a monster again and catches him in midair in a vertical suplex position and drops him in like a fucking Michinoku driver fucking what's this, I'm sure excrement, know the name of it. 1, 2, 3. For AEW, this was a great match, and Cage has got a ton of potential, but he needs heavy mentorship because he has no idea how to work as big and impressive as he is. And how they did that fucking move and that not be the finish. And you know what? Some people are going to, well, it couldn't be the finish. Sydal wasn't going to win. In that case, he shouldn't have fucking done it. Because how you could do that move and have either one of them get up from it. All right, so this didn't suck, but my God, that was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. And then they just shit on it and went to a goofy finish. What'd you think?
You know, I was conflicted about this first match. Let me first say that it was one of the things on the show I had the least problem with. I get that Brian Cage is really athletic for a big muscle head. And he could do a lot of these moves that the smaller high flyers can do. But it is a little weird watching him go back and forth with someone who is so much smaller than him, even though he can do this stuff. So that's the part that I just can't get into. You know, every match in AEW, I mean, there have been a small handful of matches that have been under 4 minutes. Everything goes for a while. Everything is an even contest, a 50-50 match until the end. But, you know, with that said, I thought it was fine. It's not the style of wrestling I like, but it wasn't terribly offensive. And I thought the open of the show between this and the next segment were great. It's everything after that I had a problem with. So I can't complain too much about this. Not exactly the way I would have done it, the style of wrestling I like, but at this point, the things that are the least offensive are the things I'm not going to complain about.
Well, yeah, we are grading on the AEW curve or the modern wrestling curve or whatever. So just because they did something that, you know, would have been a moment like Mankind's toss off the cage or my scaffold match bump, if it had actually been made to mean anything, they could have replayed it over and over. Now nobody remembers it because it didn't even lead to a cover.
I mean, can you imagine like Tiger Mask? And I love Tiger Mask, Sayama, versus like Big John Studd. And it's just a 50-50 match. And eventually John Studd starts doing the kicks and the topes and stuff, but it doesn't kill or wipe out Tiger Mask. It just keeps going. It's like that. I mean, Cage is a big, I know he's not a tall guy, but he's 3 times the size and width of a Matt Sydal and most of his opponents. So it gets a little weird when all of a sudden he can't finish anyone off and he's just doing all the high spots they do. He's obviously a talented guy, but I wouldn't have him doing all this stuff. But again, I'm not their core audience, so what do I know?